Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Wigman, congrats again on your nomination. We talked a little bit about technology issues, and it's clear to me that advancements in tech drive our national security, including our intelligence capabilities. From the rapid advancement of AI and facial recognition and space-based systems, these technologies and the countries who excel at deploying them determine the security landscape that we're going to live in. And they're changing very quickly. Sometimes, a matter of weeks or months we see dramatic changes in technology. And I think a challenge that we face here in Congress is grappling with the ability to legislate effectively on a topic that requires a lot of technical expertise. And sometimes the stuff is hard to understand. And I imagine that's similar in the legal profession. So can you share with us a little bit about how you overcome that kind of challenge when presented with some novel legal questions on emerging or evolving technologies?
Yeah, so it can be challenging for lawyers. Certainly you're an engineer, an astronaut. It's probably a lot easier for you to assess these issues than lawyers who sometimes really are wrestling with technologies that they don't understand. And so artificial intelligence is a good example of that, at least to me. It's a new technology. Understanding how a large language model works and what the implications are for privacy and national security is difficult. There are going to be questions, for example, that we're wrestling with right now under the Attorney General guidelines that govern intelligence activities and how they would apply to the intelligence community's use of large language models and artificial intelligence. So generally speaking, in other words, the goal in the intelligence community is to try to minimize your collection of U.S. person information and get as little information as possible consistent with your mission. A large language model is the opposite premise, right? You need to have as much information as possible to make that model effective and to have the answers that it produces be the correct ones. And so how are we going to reconcile those kind of opposing impulses? And the way the guidelines are written right now, they don't take into account, they weren't written with artificial intelligence in mind. So we're going to have to wrestle with that and maybe come up with different guidelines as to how that works. So we see in the executive branch, similar to what the Congress would be facing, because we have our own rules and regulations that we set for the intelligence community as an executive branch matter and face many of the same challenges that this committee or others in Congress would confront.
So it sounds like you've have a little bit of experience in the AI field that you can use here in your new role. But what other policies and legal issues that you worked on at DOJ do you anticipate is going to be a continued focus in your job in the intelligence community?
Well, I mentioned the 702 reauthorization, so that's one that we clearly will be working on closely with DOJ. Another big issue that I partnered closely with OD&I on, I don't know how familiar the committee is with it, is the fallout from the European Court of Justice's Schrems decision from a few years back. This was a decision that basically held that companies operating in Europe could not transfer data to the United States because of concern that our surveillance laws, whether those be FISA or under 12333, did not adequately protect European citizens' privacy. So we had to go back to the drawing board in terms of our laws, come up with a new executive order, which President Biden ended up issuing EO 14086 to kind of provide new privacy protections, even included a new data privacy court that we established at DOJ to hear claims of European nationals who believe they're being unlawfully surveilled. So there's kind of a creative solution. It's going to be an ongoing issue, though, because I'm sure it's being challenged already in the European courts again, and we're going to have another round of litigation. And so that's an issue that I think OD&I is going to have to continue to work on.
With the exception of that example and maybe FISA, can you do you have an example of maybe what you think another really challenging legal issue that the intelligence community is going to face here going forward?
I think if I could flag counter-narcotics, I know that's an area that of deep concern to the Congress is the fentanyl and all the deaths that are resulting from fentanyl and other synthetic opiates in the United States. And I think it's an area that the IC has always worked in the counter-narcotics space, but we're going to be doing more in that space and how to kind of merge and have law enforcement and the IC work together on the counter-narcotics threat in maybe ways that are similar to how we've dealt with the counterterrorism threat is looks good on paper, but is going to be a challenge in practice to kind of translate some of those lessons that learned in the terrorism context over the counter-narcotics context. So I think that's one that's going to be an ongoing project for a number of years.
Well, thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Does any member wish to